Thanks for listening to Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where we decide if some things are better off left in the past. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kat.
And today we're going to do Jumanji, one of my favorite movies as a kid, and I think it's the perfect time to do it right now with the new one being in theaters. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I definitely enjoyed the new one. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a fantastic movie, but it's definitely entertaining.
Yeah, it was. I definitely think it could have been a little shorter and still got the point made, but it was a fun movie, and there were some nods to this one.
For sure. It got me feeling a little bit nostalgic.
Yeah, me too. Definitely. Just a little bit of a spoiler, like there totally is a couple of callbacks directly to this movie. So I did appreciate that they were trying to do something new, but still like, hey, this is some like sacred territory to an extent, and we recognize what it is. So I did appreciate that.
As sacred as something that is a continuation of a single film can be.
What do you remember about this movie?
Oh, geez. I remember really loving this movie as a kid, and it was massively successful. It was a great family movie. It was something I remember my entire family enjoyed watching together. All the kids in the neighborhood were into it, and it was when Robin Williams was at his peak.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
He was the big man in film at the time, and everything he touched was gold. And I think that magic that he lent to film was really present in this one. I also remember that this was one of the first times when we got a large dose of CG animals in a film.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't know how it's going to hold up. It looked amazing. I remember being completely awestruck by it, and I definitely remember those little monkeys quite a bit.
Yeah, I definitely remember the CG animals, and I do remember when we did our Twister episode a few episodes back that one of the trivia things was that they actually used, like they reskinned some of the animals from this for the cows. So the CG was really good that they felt like they should reuse it in other movies. So That's pretty interesting. Getting ready for this podcast, I started...
Weird. I don't think of this movie being as old as that one.
Yeah, it is.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, it has Kirsten Dunst in it as a kid.
As a child. Like she looks
really
like she's like maybe 12.
It doesn't feel that old to me.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty old. It came out when I was in like second grade, I think. First or second grade.
Oh, gross.
But getting ready
so
for
old.
this... Yeah, we are. You're pushing 30.
Oh.
But what I remember from this movie, or at least getting ready for this podcast, and I started reflecting on what I remember, this meme of like, what year is it, has been really big lately because they've been bringing back, you know, old properties like Jumanji's been, or not, well, of course Jumanji's back, and Jurassic Park is back, so all these old movies are coming back.
Women's lib is dead.
But so I started thinking about what do I remember, and slowly I started thinking about the big scenes, and then I started slowly realizing I almost remember this entire movie like beat by beat. Like I couldn't give you dialogue, but I think I remember basically this entire movie. So I'm very interested to watch it. I'm not just gonna be like, I remember this and this and this. Let's just watch the movie and see how it holds up.
Let's get into it.
After 25 years in the jungle, Alan Parrish has come home. But he didn't come home alone.
It's a stampede! Don't look back! Oh!
It's Robin Williams in the greatest movie adventure you'll ever take. Jumanji, rated PG, at theaters now.
All right, so we just watched Jumanji, and I gotta say, I enjoyed it quite a bit.
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, but there were also parts of it that I didn't realize were quite as horrible as they were.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it. I actually am the opposite. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I thought. Like I still think it was a fantastic movie and it was really fun, but I do think I had a little bit too much nostalgia for it, and I don't think it quite lived up to it, but it was still a really, really good, fun movie. So yeah, and the monkeys were pretty bad.
I mean, so obviously CG does not age well. It doesn't really matter what the film is. CG is not going to age well. I still think with the quality of the CG, this movie still holds up against other family films that are coming out today.
I agree. Like, I'd say with the exception of the monkeys, like the monkeys were pretty bad because they have facial expressions and stuff and they were prominently featured. But like the other animals, like the rhinos and the giraffes and the alligators and some of the animals that are less expressive, I thought looked really good still.
Right. Yeah. And I think this era of really fantastic family films has come to an end. And so I think that's part of the reason that this film is still so good when you compare it with modern day family films, where a lot of them are made for TV, and they're just doesn't seem to be as much of the budget for them in Hollywood anymore.
Right. It's all the blockbusters and then the Oscar bait movies. Like, I can't remember or think of the last like family movie that wasn't animated.
Right, and especially in the fantasy realm.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think now was the right time to come back with something for Jumanji, and like the new one, Jumanji Into the Jungle. I do think that they modernized it, but were still faithful to what the themes of the movie were. So
right. I think it was a good choice to stick The Rock in there,
and make it a video game.
Draw in that audience.
Right. It was smart. And Kevin Hart is super hot right now, and Jack Black's kind of on his way. Not super hot like sexy, but
He's so hot right now. Those crossed eyes.
Yeah.
So Jumanji. I did not remember how terrible some of the acting was. Because, in my mind, this is it's all Robin Williams. And of course it has Kirsten Dunst, who, in my opinion, was one of the best child actors of all time.
She was
Her
great.
Her performance is still really, really solid.
She won an Academy Award as a child.
She's fantastic in this movie. And I think that's part of the reason there's such a stark contrast with most of the other children. So the boy was good.
That's the voice of
solid.
Chip from Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, well, that's a delightful trivia tidbit, Michael. But the other kids, so the movie starts with a flashback to, was it the 50s?
I don't know, probably the 80s. I would say earlier than that.
Late 50s, early 60s?
No, this movie started in 1969, and that thing was buried pretty deep. I'd say it was probably late 1800s, early 1900s.
Oh, no, I didn't mean the very beginning.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Yeah, the beginning was 1969.
So a large part towards the beginning of this movie was the 60s. And the acting from pretty much everyone in this portion of the film is just painful.
I don't think so. I think, what's his name? David something Greer. Why can't I think of his name?
David Alan Grier?
David Alan Grier. I thought he was great. I thought they did a good job making him look younger.
Oh, that hair.
That hair was fantastic. Oof. And then I thought it was fun. The kids weren't so good. Like the bullies, they were like the stereotypical bullies, and they weren't very great. One of
my notes on this film is David Alan Grier does not, all in caps, look good with that hairstyle.
I thought he looked like 10 years younger than he was. At least.
He looked awful. But
I disagree.
Whatever. I mean, he looked young because this movie is old. He's a lot younger than he was in Return to Me, which is like usually what we see him in.
Well, I don't know what Return to Me is, but
it has David Duchovny and Minnie Driver, Michael.
I haven't seen it, but
what? His wife dies, and then Minnie Driver gets his dead wife's heart.
Oh, that's weird. I hate that idea.
I love it.
But I mean, so the movie in a nutshell, I guess we should just like quickly summarize it. Most people have probably seen Jumanji, but for those of you who haven't, or for some reason listening to this, we'll summarize it real quick. So basically, in a nutshell,
weirdos.
So Alan Parrish is the character that Robin Williams plays, and as a child, he's bullied, and he goes and runs and hides at his father's factory, and his father's like the richest man in town. He's taking care of the whole town by running this business and is employing basically everyone, so it's a really, really big deal. And his father is very much like a man's man, like, don't be a coward, go stand up to the bullies, not realizing that there's like 5 or 6 bullies. He thinks it's one bully, so his son gets the snot beat out of him because he forced him to go fight a bully.
And he watches from the window.
Right. He totally does
nothing
as they're destroying his bike.
Yeah.
So after he gets the snot beat out of him, he like runs through a construction yard, and then like everybody just leaves. I guess it's lunchtime, and he hears drumming, and
he's
so
just wandering around this open pit without a hard hat.
Right. And everybody leaves, but he hears this drumming, and he keeps like walking towards the drumming, and he like digs up a giant crate, which was filled with dirt. Like, I don't feel like he should have been able to lift that box, but somehow he did.
Have you ever like tried to pull something out of the side of a cliff? It doesn't come out so easy.
Especially when it's a giant wooden crate filled with sand. So he pulls it out. He finds a board game. He definitely wasn't, because he got the snot out of him.
Getting ready for his moment.
Shut up. So he finds the game. He brings it home. His dad comes in and says, "You know what? You're a man. You stood up to the bullies. I didn't realize there was like 5 of them. That was my bad for sending you out there." And he goes,
He just figured he'd wait till he got home to have that apology
Right.
instead of like
going
doing
out there and
something
running
about it
after
in the
him.
moment.
Right? And so he's like, "You're a man now, so I'm going to send you to some boarding school where like your father, I went, and my father went, and my father's father went, and you're ready now." And they have a fight. He's like, "I don't want to go to boarding school. I don't want to go to a place that's named after me. This is stupid." So dad's like, "You're going to go. Quit being a baby." After they have their little like fight, the mom and dad leave to go to some like charity event or something. And this girl comes, who is the girlfriend of the bullies, saying like, "Hey, I brought your bike back. I'm really sorry that they did this." And they decide to play the Jumanji game. And the very first turn, he gets sucked into the game. And it fast forwards 30 years later. And basically what ends up happening, there's these 2 orphans who are living with their aunt, who's Lilith, and Frasier is the aunt. And then you've got, so the 2 kids that are living with their aunt, the orphans, their names are Peter and Judy. And they end up living in Alan's house. So they end up finding the board game that for like days they keep hearing drumming. And they decide to start playing, and of course the board game comes to life. I think the very first thing, they have like a couple like wild animals come, and then there's like giant mosquitoes, and then they roll, and Alan comes back as an adult, and it's Robin Williams, and basically they're just trying to finish the game and put life back to normal.
Pretty much. Got a couple problems with this.
Okay, go for it.
So pretty early on in the movie, these kids move into this house with their aunt, and then they hear rumors about things that happened in the house.
Right.
And of course, the aunt purchased the house for a real steal. And like we've talked about this, we would totally buy a murder house if we got a good deal on it. Like, I love a bargain. And that's usually how it goes. Like, if the house is cheap, something went down, there's got to be some bad juju. So these kids, and obviously Judy is like super morbid. She likes to tell people fake stories about how her parents died, and she revels in their shock and horror.
And uncomfort.
Uncomfort?
Discomfort.
You want to try
English.
that again?
No, I'm going to leave it in.
So, pretty early on, we've established that these kids, they've got kind of like dark, twisted minds. Then they discover this board game, and it's up in the attic, and all these weird things start happening. And for some reason, their first thought is not ghosts. Like, I call BS on that.
Why would you call BS? Clearly it's the game. The game says, they open up the second flap, and it's like, "This world will come into your world." It explains it.
Yeah, but then all these creepy things start happening that look like ghosts, and they're in the attic. And, when kids go up into an attic, their first thought is ghosts.
It, especially when they found out that, or they think somebody was murdered there, which is pretty messed up. So the reason that they hear these rumors is, the first rumor they hear is that, like, this exterminator comes because they see like a bat in the attic. So the exterminator comes and tells them that the father went crazy and chopped up Alan into little pieces and hid him all over the house.
Right.
Which is super messed up for an adult to tell 2 children. And yeah, it's just awful.
He's
it's
an
so messed
exterminator.
up.
He's working with a lot of chemicals, Michael.
That's
You
true.
should be more compassionate. Yeah, so pretty early on, I mean, I think that's a little weird that they don't think that these are ghosts. And then they just keep on playing the game, which is like even more screwed up.
Well, I think, yeah, that it's one of those things where you would think it'd be a little bit more like a scary movie where they have a little bit more denial before accepting their fate, that they need to actually keep playing the game.
Right, and then like a slutty girl dies and a black guy dies, and then like the rest continues.
Well, that's the thing that's actually kind of messed up about this movie, is this is something that I completely forgot about. So the first or second turn, they like roll out these giant mosquitoes, and they like hit them with tennis rackets and stuff, and then eventually like all the mosquitoes fly out a broken window. And throughout the movie, you hear like paramedics from like, "Oh, there's another bite," and by the end of the movie, you find out that there's like 90 people have been bitten by these mosquitoes and have gone unconscious or
Right.
died.
Yeah, this game is not just punishing the people who open it and who play it and have some kind of idea of how to defeat these things. Like, this game is just unleashed upon everyone in the proximity.
Yeah, so at one point towards the end of the movie, just one of the things, like, there's a monsoon, and it fills the house with water, and eventually the house kind of breaks, and like all the water flows out into the street, and there's alligators and crocodiles swimming around in the street. There's a stampede at one point with like rhinos and stuff like that. Like, they're destroying the town, and the monkeys are driving cars and shooting shotguns.
Right. Yeah, the monkeys hop into the police cruiser. They could have killed someone with the rifle. They shot through the roof, and then they take off in the car.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then it also, they call forth like a big game hunter, like old-timey hunter with a funny hat, like the explorer hat, and he's going around shooting. So that scene is ridiculous. Oh my God, as an adult, I was very troubled, how he got his new weapon. So
Right.
Robin Williams' character Alan rolls, and this like hunter comes out, and he's going to be chasing the rest of the movie. So another side plot that I didn't mention, the summary is this hunter guy's hunting them the entire time, trying to stop them from playing the game so he can kill Alan.
And what's funny is I remember him being a much larger and I'd say like more intimidating character than he actually was. This time, I just kind of felt like he was this little throwaway nuisance.
Well, it's funny. What's interesting is he's the same actor that plays the father. And I think it's a pretty good thing, because he was afraid of his father, and he needed to stand up to his father and stand up to the world and everything like that. So it was a good little foil. That actor has actually been in another movie that we covered. Did you know that?
No.
He played the butler in Richie Rich.
Richie Rich.
But to get back to my point, what really troubled me is he runs out of ammo, because he's got this like old-timey, like late 1800s like elephant rifle. And he runs out of ammo, so he goes to a gun shop. He's like, I need ammo. They're like, they stopped making that ammo in 1904. And he's like, all right, I'll need a new gun. He's like, you're going to have to wait 2 weeks for a cooldown period. And he just drops a bunch of gold.
I knew that little bit of gun history.
Right? Yeah, like, no, why would you know that? But he drops down like a bag of gold, and the guy's like, all right, I'll fill out this paperwork. And he just gives him like a high-powered, semi-automatic, silenced sniper rifle.
Right.
And like, what? Like, clearly, if this guy is coming with his weapons,
I mean,
and
what
trying to
state is this supposed to be in? Because if it's West Virginia, like, that totally makes sense.
I feel like it's like New England, because everything in the 90s was like New England.
That's true.
It was always children moving to New England.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that was weird. I was kind of like, in our political climate with like gun control and all this stuff that's going on, I was just like, that's really irresponsible. He's definitely going to go shoot some people.
Yeah, I mean, there are some weird things that are happening here that are very irresponsible. I mean, so like the cop, who calls the cop in the first place?
Nobody. He's just like driving by, and he sees, he's just driving by, and Alan is like dressed in like a loincloth, and he's got a giant beard. He's walking across the street, and he like slams on the brakes and almost hits him, and he jumps up on top of the car to prevent himself from getting, and he just happens to be passing by. Yeah,
so the cop is like not paying attention. This dude, like, obviously he's wearing like an animal hide tunic and some kind of a shawl made out of giant leaves, and he looks like a wild bushman. And he sees him standing on the side of the road, and like, we know that he sees him, and he doesn't question the situation, and he gets distracted by something, and then he almost runs the guy over. Now, granted, he steps out in the street in front of him, but like, he's been in Jumanji for a while. He's a little bit
loopy,
nutty. And then this cop like almost runs him over, almost kills him. The dude jumps up on his car, and instead of being like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I almost killed you, and oh my god, you're an amazing acrobat, that was some really amazing jumping you just did, he gets out and he's like, get off of my car, like, comes at him all hot like that. Like, that was rude and irresponsible.
Yeah, but you know what also is like,
and
really...
he's not even concerned that this guy might be like on PCP and try and eat his face or something.
Well, that wasn't a big thing in the 90s.
He's not a very good or cautious cop, in my opinion.
Being a cop was not what his original career path was, so...
No, he wanted to make shoes, so he's just a bad cop? That is not an excuse, Michael.
Well,
I'm sure there are plenty of cops who wanted to make shoes and had their dreams crushed, and they still do their jobs well.
What?
I salute you, good sirs and ma'ams.
Oh, man.
It just wasn't very fair.
You know what else is messed up about this movie?
They bond over dead parents.
Well, that, absolutely. So, yeah, there's a scene where he's really adamant that he goes and sees his family, and he finds out, like, he runs into some, like, random dude, and he's like, oh, yeah, they died. He runs into some random dude, and then he's like, oh, yeah, they went, crazy. They closed down the shop. They spent all their money trying to find their son, but they died a few years ago, and so they go to the graveyard, and he sees...
just missed them.
He just missed them by, like, 5 years, but... So they go to the graveyard, and he's like staring lovingly at their tombstone, and then Judy, played by Kirsten Dunst, is just like, our parents are dead too.
I know.
Super awkward.
A little bit insensitive, but I mean, she is a kid, so
right.
Kids are weird.
You know what else is messed up about this movie?
It's a bummer.
It is. There are parts that are definitely bummers, but they they realize that it's not their turn anymore. The game's not letting them play. So they realize they need to get Sarah, played by Bonnie Hunt,
Sarah was the little girl who was Alan Parrish's friend.
Right. And so they need to go find her. So they find her as an adult, and they tell her what's going on. She faints. They break into her house, and then they carry her presumably several blocks.
Like unconscious, and no one stops them. Where's that cop? Out
Right?
there not doing his job, almost running people over.
Right. So then they bring her into the house, and they keep forcing. She keeps trying to be like, I'm going to go make iced tea, trying to like obviously make it an escape. They keep just like holding her hostage until they play the game, which is the right thing. The only way out was through. That was the right move. But there were variants that they're just like, you need to quit being a baby, not recognizing that she spent 30 years agonizing over this, is mentally ill because of it.
No one believed her.
Right. It's
Poor
ridiculous.
She's a good character. I love Bonnie Hunt. I wish we saw more of her.
Yeah, what happened to her?
I don't know. Maybe she had kids and got bored.
Right. Speaking of, you kind of mentioned this movie is a little dark earlier.
It is. It's like, okay. And here's the thing. I think we kind of forgot that a lot of kids and family movies back when we were growing up were a little bit dark. Like, they're a lot heavier and had like much more, I don't know, just complex life issues that they dealt with than movies today. Like, there was a lot of divorce in those movies.
Right, in the 90s and stuff like that.
There was death. I mean, like, Tom and Huck was pretty dang dark. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they dealt with, like, some heavy stuff in these movies, and, like, this movie's no exception. I had totally forgotten about that. I just remember it being, like, this fun romp with adventure and CG animals and Robin Williams, but it's pretty loaded. It
is. So let's just, like, count off some things really quick. So mosquitoes that killed, like, 90 people.
Right.
Massive property damage by animals.
Them not calling in the CDC to figure out why people
what's going
are dying.
On. You've got somebody with PTSD. You've got this man who's been trapped in the jungle for 30 years, adapting to society.
His parents are dead,
and his family is dead. You've got a guy hunting the greatest game, man. They've got people hunting people.
Two kids with dead parents.
And at one point, then they both have like mental illness a little bit. Like, they're both suffering from forms of depression. He's not talking. And then this boy cheats at some point, and he is transformed into a human monkey hybrid.
He looks like he's from Whoville.
He does, yeah. He looks like the Who's in the Jim Carrey Grinch movie. But I think the darkest part of this movie, and I'm just going to insert the speech.
We don't need your help.
I don't think so. You think monkeys, mosquitoes, and lions are bad? That's just the beginning. I've seen things you've only seen in your nightmares. Things you can't even imagine. Things you can't even see. There are things that hunt you in the night. Then something screams. Then you hear them eating. And you hope to God that you're not dessert. Afraid? You don't even know what afraid is. You will not last 5 minutes without me.
So, you're gonna help us?
I'll watch. I'm not afraid.
That speech
That's
is
nice
dark.
for a kids movie. What is this rated anyway?
It's PG.
What?
Yeah, it's
You're
just
kidding.
PG. No, it's just PG.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
I guess there's no blood. They don't show anyone dying.
There's no blood and there's no swearing.
It's pretty heavy though.
It
This
is
like
heavy.
bordering on PG-13, I'd say.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we've hit most of the major themes of the movie. Are there any like standout like scenes that you want to talk about?
Oh, I loved the scene where the cop and Bonnie Hunt, what's her name, Sarah?
Yeah.
Where the cop and Sarah are out on this road, and one of the vines like grabs the police
the
cruiser
car.
and just like crunches
Crunches it.
Like it looks so good, and I love his scream.
Yeah, there was a couple things that I really liked. Like, I think the plants were really done well. Like, I think some of that was
Yeah.
practical.
Oh, for sure.
The lion in some points looked dumb. Like, there was some part. Oh my god, there was one scene with the lion that was really bad. So they
And on one hand, it's really fantastic for animatronics, and I think it's pretty close to the standard that we held animatronics to until very recently.
right.
I think the problem was that like it looked like it had gingivitis, like the fleshy parts in the mouth
Was
just
kinda
looked
pinkish red.
plastic.
Yeah. Well, my
Close,
thing was
but
there
no
was
cigar.
points where it was CG, and there's a point when it's chasing Alan, and he like jumps up on a chandelier to like get it to jump into the door frame, and he like locks it into a closet.
Mhm.
But the CG, they didn't time it right, and there's literally a point where you can see the lion go through his leg. So there's a
Right.
little bit of bad filmmaking there. But
little bit.
the animatronic was great. I think the monkeys didn't hold up because they made expressions and stuff like that, so that was
well,
pretty
and their
obvious.
faces were a little more human than monkey. They didn't quite look a lot like any particular species
Right.
of monkey.
And
So that might have been where that went wrong.
and that might have been stylized specifically because it's supposed to be like the artwork on the board game kind of thing. So it could be that it's stylized like the Pulp Fiction kind of like books and
Right.
stuff like that.
Same
so,
thing for the lion. It's kind of like an angular, muscular version of a lion.
Right.
The plants still looked great.
I
There's
thought
this
the plants
one
looked fantastic.
particular plant that looks like a hybrid between Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors and, well,
An anus.
my anus. I mean, you tell me, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, gross. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, and this was one of the first things I remembered, is this like scream, and I'm never going to be able to like recreate the scream, but there's a
Oh.
point where
There are a couple good screams in
there's a
this
couple
movie.
good screams in this movie, but there's a point where Alan actually gets arrested by David Alan Grier's cop character, and they're trying to get the board game back because the hunter guy stole the board game. So Sarah, Peter, and Judy are trying to get the game back, and they end up in this like Walmart like store. I think it was called like Sir Save-A-Lot or something like that. And Judy and Sarah somehow get the game, and they're playing like hot potato, running around the store trying to distract the hunter guy. Meanwhile, Peter like pulls like a Home Alone, and he sets up these traps where he like takes like
know.
laundry detergent down one aisle and like
and he did it
sprays
really quickly.
really quick, and then he goes and gets a canoe and like scuba tanks and sets it up on this weight rack, and he drops like weights to like snap part of the scuba tank off, and it like makes like a rocket towards the hunter, and like it hits him, and he's like flying through the store, and he's like does this scream, he's like woo! It's so bad.
We should play it.
It's so
It's pretty
funny.
amazing.
And then he goes flying and he gets covered in paint and stuff. That scene made me laugh so hard when we watched it.
It looks ridiculous.
Yeah, it really
I mean,
did.
there were definitely a few moments in this movie where, you know, for lack of the technology to do the effects practically or via CG, they just ended up speeding up film, and it just
there
looks
was quite a few times they did
ridiculous.
that. Like when he's wrestling the alligator.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
there were a few of those.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenes where they speed it up and it's just a little awkward.
There were a couple of wounded stuntmen involved with the alligators.
Yeah, so after we watch the movie, we go and look up like trivia and stuff, and there's a scene where he fights an alligator that actually looks fantastic. It looks really
It
good.
does
Actually, I
look
think
good.
it was a crocodile. He mentions like crocodiles have like fur on their chins or something like that.
What?
So he's like wrestling it and everything, but apparently while making this movie, that the crocodile is actually a couple dudes in a big crocodile suit, and he's like wrestling it, and apparently he got really into it because it was like in a tank and he got adrenaline and he's just like starts punching the alligator crocodile thing, and there were people in the costume and he was literally punching them. It's really funny to find out afterwards that he got really into it and did that. Oh man. And then the ending,
poor stunt guys to do that and in water, and then have Robin Williams be
punching
like
him.
elbowing you in the ribs.
Right?
Jeez.
Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get to the end of the movie? Because I definitely want to talk about the ending of the movie.
Well, this is pretty close to the end of the movie, but you kind of get the sense that Sarah's character is trying to reconnect with Alan at the end, and then you think it's gonna like build into something, and then he just totally shuts her down, and you realize in that moment that he's emotionally and sexually stunted, and that's that. Like, they just totally drop that and move on with their lives.
Right, he's wired for survival only. The only thing that kind of bugs me about his thing is that he's a little chubby for somebody who's been surviving in the jungle for 30 years.
That's harsh.
Now, granted, he's not as chubby as he's been in other movies and stuff. Like he's trimmer than he is in Mrs. Doubtfire, I'd say, in other movies, but he's definitely not a trim man. Definitely nowhere as near as trim as he was for Hook. But yeah, I don't believe for a minute he's been in a jungle surviving for 30 years.
I mean, it kind of depends on what kind of jungle.
I
guess.
And
how many other things you have to fight for food.
Well, he talks about everything that they've seen so far is actually like nothing compared to what's out there. So
maybe he
presumably
started pollinating avocados.
Well,
they're the good fat.
Yeah. So I'm gonna talk about the new one really briefly because we just watched it. So basically, in a nutshell, there's a point.
Wrapped up this one.
Well, it's gonna tie into what we're talking about with him specifically. So in the new one, they end up in this tree house, and it says Alan Parrish carved into it. So they find the tree house that he's in, that he lived in for the 30 years.
It's a pretty sweet tree house.
It was. Now, the thing that bothers
candles.
me is that movie, the new one, kind of breaks this movie a little bit. So in this one, it's very heavily implied that it's really just jungle, endless jungle, and it's him and the hunter guy are like the only people. But in the new one, there's an entire town outside of the jungle that they're able to get to pretty quickly. So it's like, I get that you're a child and everything, but if you became the master of the jungle like you said you were, how did you not find out that there was a bazaar down the way? And the new movie
shows... Well, you never travel further than you can get back to shelter and safety before dark.
I get that.
That kind of makes sense.
But in the new one, it explains that there